You know what? I should have predicted it more than I actually ended up doing, that Manchester United were going to go to Anfield and get a result against runaway league leaders Liverpool. Fantastic performance, whether it's just a symptom of the fact that these players finally had a week to work with Amorim on the training pitch, and we actually got to see the system come out in more of a fashion that Amorim would like. This is, I guess, a sign of things to come, hopefully anyway, because I feel like we've been conned by Manchester United performances before, conned by Manchester United performances against Liverpool before. Last season, Ten Hag was undefeated against Liverpool. Sometimes you can get conned by certain results, but this felt like something clicked. And whether it's just hope coming from me as a Manchester United fan, I don't know. But it just felt like the penny dropped. It felt like just something became apparent. Just I feel like he settled on something. The players started to understand the system a little bit more, which we'll discuss in detail. I feel like he finally figured out his starting 11 as well, which was something he was chopping and changing with at the start. I feel like he's really settled on this group, and I guess we'll see whether this is a one-off or it's a sign of things to come in the next few games. But look, Liverpool are going to have a few dodgy results at points throughout the season. I guess the thing coming out of this from a Liverpool's perspective is don't let this carry on. And there's a few things happening off the field that might negatively affect them. But I think they've got just such a good enough squad. I don't think it'll matter that much. I don't think they'll be as good second half of the season as they were the first, because I think that'll be really hard to replicate. But I still think there's enough to get over the line. And we'll discuss the teams in detail. We'll go over Liverpool's attacking phase first. The United wouldn't look to press initially in the off-the-ball shape. They would allow Liverpool to move up the field. They'd sit in a really good mid to low block. Liverpool would line up in their sort of 2-3-2-3 in the way they've done all season, really. Gravenberch in between the two fullbacks. Jones and McAllister in the high H, though McAllister could drop in and make it a double pivot alongside Gravenberch as well to help progress the ball up the pitch. He's very comfortable in both roles. McAllister is a fantastic player. He's so underrated, so underappreciated, I think, across the league. Just comfortable receiving the ball in deeper areas, comfortable receiving the ball in more advanced ones. Close to the striker. He's good off the ball, he's good on the ball. Fantastic. And he'd flirt in between those two roles well. And if he was in the double pivot position, and then Jones would maybe come in a little bit more centrally. You'd have a bit more free reign to move within the centre of the pitch. Luis Diaz could also drop in and make it a bit more of a box, make it a bit of a false nine system as well, with Curtis Jones in the right half space, Luis Diaz on the left. Gakpo and Salah as ever high and wide. And United initially would look to be a little bit passive. Højlund would start moving closer up to Virgil van Dijk in this area of the pitch here to obviously prevent him from looking up and finding his long diagonals out wide to the likes of Gakpo, to the likes of Salah. You stop Van Dijk playing, and that's a massive quality in Liverpool's build-up that they won't be able to use. So he would then have to look towards Konate to then play the ball forward, who's not too bad on the ball, but he's not Van Dijk. Højlund would sometimes shadow from Van Dijk into Konate, but it wasn't as aggressive, wasn't as relentless in his press, and I do think his task role was more to just stay with Van Dijk. You'd then also get, if I just make this a little bit more sensible now, get Fernandes, who would go from Alexander-Arnold and come up to Konate. The issue is with this, and this did present a bit of a problem for Manchester United, was sometimes he got caught in between Konate and Alexander-Arnold. Alexander-Arnold had a bit more freedom to move inwards, move in centrally. It was a lot harder for Bruno Fernandes to read. Dalot was tasked with marking Salah, who would obviously pin him back. Salah's not going to look to receive the ball deep. He's going to look to use his back against Dalot or look for the ball over the top. So there's a lot of distance between Bruno Fernandes and Diogo Dalot. And a lot of times Konate was just able to find these passes outside of Trent Alexander-Arnold to play. And Mainey would be a little bit further up because he'd be more tasked with Ryan Gravenberch. He'd get Ugarte on McAllister. Even if McAllister had moved into those more attacking half-space positions, Ugarte would follow him. This meant that Curtis Jones was the free man, but Martinez would be tasked with engaging Curtis Jones into these positions here. And I spoke about this more in the Newcastle video, but the Manchester United wide centre-backs, I thought, were dreadful on the day. This time around, it felt like they fully understood their roles. They knew when to engage, they knew when to press, and they were offering support to the midfield too when needed, and were excellent. And Curtis Jones didn't get a look, and Martinez won, it felt like, every challenge against him. But this also meant that Trent Alexander-Arnold got a little bit more space in this area to be able to play and get forward, as Jones would almost at points come into this position to not look for the ball, but to allow Martinez to engage him. And Martinez would then have to balance between dropping back into position to make sure Trent Alexander-Arnold doesn't get the ability to exploit that space in between Maguire and Dalot, because obviously Dalot has to stay wide to take care of Salah. So it meant that Curtis Jones had a little bit more free space. Trent could maybe play it inside, where they could try and switch the play over onto the far side and play that way. But his passing wasn't on today, Trent. Giving the ball away a lot of times, a lot of poor moments in the game that just really halted the build-up for Liverpool. And we're going to discuss his defensive issues, and look, everyone's discussed his defensive issues. But he was given a lot of time and freedom. And to be fair, Bruno Fernandes would work back onto him really well. Diallo would then drop in as well, making it a flat four in midfield, which was a lot better for Manchester United. It was a thing that they were really poor with, again, against Newcastle United, was the wide players staying higher up alongside Højlund. This time they were dropping back. They were getting alongside the midfield too and making sure that the space in these areas wasn't left exposed for too long. So Bruno would cover around Trent Alexander-Arnold if he didn't release the ball quick enough. Maybe give Martinez a little bit more comfort to come out and press Jones as well. So it was good discipline from the Manchester United team in the midfield, dropping back, and they really did prevent Liverpool from playing in centrally. Of course, though, having Dalot on this side in these areas is always a threat. If they could find him with the long ball and he could attack Dalot one-on-one. But they would sometimes be able to go down the left-hand side if they moved backwards to then fire the ball across, or they'd go through the centre of the pitch. You get Dalot coming into Diaz on this side as he would look to drop in and again try and overload the midfield and provide an issue for that midfield too. But more responsible from the United midfield four. They could drop in, they could congest the centre of the pitch, and Dalot had him physically in the game as well, so it was a bit more of a match for Dalot to be able to come out and win it. He obviously lacks the mobility, he doesn't spring into it as quickly as maybe Martinez does on the other side. But again, that's still a physical issue for Diaz, and he couldn't exploit the space in behind by running on either. But he could get the ball, maybe play it backwards and play it to the side. McAllister could get on the ball in these positions. Gakpo could get on the ball, and Robertson could overlap as well, dragging Diallo with him. He did a really good job on this side and prevented any real overloads in the wide areas between Robertson and Gakpo. And the reason why Liverpool found it so hard to build up on this side, if I just move this defence across a little bit, on that right-hand side of Diallo and Ugarte, you have two fantastic players when it comes to their off-the-ball work, and they quickly congest that space. It would give Mazraoui the freedom to come out and press with Diallo and support. Ugarte would do a really good job of again, just blocking any central passing lanes to Diaz, to McAllister. And so at points, they'd almost have to go backwards into these areas, and McAllister would have to pull off a lot deeper to get on the ball. The only issue is, at points in the first half especially, is Højlund, Mainu and Fernandes wouldn't recover in as well enough. They don't have that just overall defensive awareness as the right-hand side does. So they could find balls in between the defensive midfield in these zones. They could play it horizontally to the man in space, where Liverpool, if they played it quick enough, could then get it over to Salah on the right-hand side, and he could attack down the flank. And with the defence having to respond, coming over to this side, this did create some openings. And to be fair to Ugarte and Mainu, if for whatever reason Martinez or Maguire, whoever would make a jump out from the defensive line to engage with a player, they'd be really alert to the space that opened up. They'd fill into the defensive line, making sure it was tight and there was as little space horizontally as possible for Liverpool to find any real space to exploit. Except for one man, and that was Alexis McAllister, who made a few fantastic runs from deep into whatever little space he could find to get on the end of Salah crosses, and some of the passes into him from these areas were fantastic. McAllister got on the ball and produced a few shots, a good couple saves from Onana, and he was always a threat. But Salah on that right-hand side, getting his crosses in, dribbling at Dalot, won the penalty from that side as well with the cross in, and you were never really going to keep him quiet. As much as United's defensive work was a lot better, the wide centre-backs understood their roles a lot more, and they couldn't really get the joy in the centre of the pitch. Liverpool, it did get by with the individual quality they have. And as the game went on, Fernandes started winning the ball back a lot higher. He was being a bit more aggressive, just being a bit more alert to the danger of Trent Alexander-Arnold and Konate, and he wouldn't look to go and engage Konate as much. He'd drop onto Trent and prevent that easy pass because Trent was the danger man, while Højlund would stick on Van Dijk. So they adapted well, but again, quality wins your games sometimes, or at least get your goals in certain situations, and Liverpool have that in abundance. But how did United look to attack the game, and how did they get their goals? So United built up with the back three, and they seem to have ditched the idea of going with Maguire and Ugarte as the double pivot in these areas when they try and build up, and instead going with a more orthodox back three, with them spread across the width of the box, Onana joining in as well. And it felt like they were suckering Liverpool in to not play through the midfield. I can't really remember many times where they played through Ugarte and Mainu to get the ball up the pitch. And if anything, it felt like they more often than not didn't even build up in these sections. They'd go straight long from Onana up to Højlund, up to the wide areas to try and get the ball upfield as much as possible. And United were fantastically better than they have been all season, to be honest with you, at challenging for the second ball. So when it would go up, if Højlund didn't win the header, Diallo, Fernandes, Mainu and Ugarte, and even Dalot and Mazraoui were perfectly positioned to win those second balls, as I just said, and get United playing and getting them to attack as quick as possible and hurt that Liverpool defence. So when they would build up with the back three, it would be, as you can see here, with Mazraoui a little bit deeper than Dalot for reasons I'll explain in a second. And you get Diaz and Salah almost trying to manage the three centre-backs. And ideally, they'd want the ball over here to Dalot. You'd get then maybe Diaz coming across. You'd get Salah coming across from Martinez to Maguire. And Dalot would maybe have to go back to Onana. The only issue is you're having basically 2-on-4 here. And so there was always 2 free men for United. So even if Liverpool tried to switch across into this area, there was very little chance that Salah would have of managing the pass into both Maguire and Onana, because you'd have to sort of keep an eye over both Diaz's shoulders, which isn't easy, and combined with the fact that Salah isn't the overall best presser in the world. So United could play it from side to side if they needed to. He couldn't play upfield, to be fair, Dalot, because Gakpo would drop in and he would track Mazraoui in this area. He'd get McAllister and Jones pushed onto Mainu and Ugarte again. United weren't too keen on playing through anyway. And if they then played the ball back to Onana, you'd then get Salah moving over to Martinez to block that easy pass, or at least attempt to. But Onana was very good with his distribution to find Dalot in these positions. Now, Dalot had a lot of space to receive the balls in these areas because Trent Alexander-Arnold was tucked in, looking after Fernandes. It felt like that was his desired marker. They tried to make it as narrow as possible so Diallo and Fernandes couldn't find those inside runs. Robertson would come in as well on the left-hand side with Diallo, but the only good thing about this for Liverpool on this side is that Mazraoui doesn't have that engine. He's not a physical runner off the ball that's going to use a yard of pace out of nowhere to get up the field and get him behind and speed away from his marker. He's just not that type of player. But Dalot getting on the ball here could find it in space. This would leave Trent Alexander-Arnold in positions where he'd have to gamble. Does he stay with Fernandes and hope that someone can recover across, like Jones and Gravenberch, who didn't have a desired marker? He was more of a shield. He was more of a player that was ready to spring in certain circumstances and try and cover wherever. Does he jump to Dalot and hope that Gravenberch can cover around, or does he stay in and hope that Gravenberch comes around and maybe jumps onto Mainu, so, as I say, Jones can come over to Dalot? Just never looked comfortable, and the times he did get one-on-one with Dalot, he got rinsed big style. And let's not forget that this is a Dalot who has not played well at left wing back since Amorim has joined the club. He's been guilty too much of taking it back onto his right foot, killing any United attacks, playing the safe option inside. But against Alexander-Arnold, Dalot probably felt as comfortable as he ever has in that position. And Trent Alexander-Arnold's one-on-one defending, it's just not good. I think that's fair to say. It's not good. It never really has been. It's never been his strength. It's not what's getting him this move to Real Madrid. I just thought it would be a little bit better than it was. And whether this is a game that was off the back of the contract situation, whether his head's dropped because of all the background noise, I don't know. This felt like a performance we saw from him a lot in the Klopp year, where it all fell apart and they finished fifth, where it felt like he was just dropping stinker after stinker each week. And he'd have to cover across, then Konate would maybe have to move across, Van Dijk would be left with Højlund, they'd have to react in certain circumstances, but this didn't happen early enough at all, really. And it felt like Konate was tasked more with looking after Rasmus Højlund, and Van Dijk was used as the +1, so Højlund could position himself well and keep Konate pinned in the centre. Fernandes would sometimes make movements in between Konate and Alexander-Arnold. There'd be a lot of space for that type of run. Gravenberch would have to be alert and track him, and he did do a decent job of it, it has to be said. We're very alert to Fernandes' run, where Dalot could find the pass on the outside. Sometimes it was a bit of a mixed bag. Sometimes the pass from Dalot wasn't the best, but then also sometimes Fernandes just couldn't turn and play because of Gravenberch. Or Fernandes could even drop in a little bit more, pull Gravenberch in a lot more centrally, to then just create complete isolation for Trent Alexander-Arnold against Dalot, where Dalot could take a touch out of his feet and sprint past Alexander-Arnold time and time again. He did it for the first goal for United, where Leach scored, and to be honest, he did it throughout the game. Just one-on-one, taking him to a standing position and then accelerating away from him time and time again. Poor one-on-one from Trent, and United made him pay. They really did. I mean, Alexander-Arnold couldn't have had a poorer game. Even if the pass had to be recycled to Bruno Fernandes and United's play looked like it had slowed down and Trent got back to a more narrow base, Dalot would still look to use his movement to run in behind. and received the ball from deep from Bruno Fernandes, which he did a few times and pulled in a few good crosses. And then later on in the second half, Trent still struggled when Garnacho came on the pitch. So he just had constant one-on-one threats to deal with, and I can't imagine he would have enjoyed seeing Garnacho at that late stage of the game with his blistering acceleration. But Fernandes was also quality in getting on the ball and dictating play and keeping United's attacks going, making sure he was constantly finding the runs in behind. Højlund was a direct option from the deeper areas, from the likes of Onana, from the centre-backs, where the pass could go up to him, he could maybe hold it on and again look for the second ball opportunities of Meno, with Bruno Fernandes, of Ugarte, of maybe Diallo coming in to play it short, or to maybe have the ball go over the tops of Konate and Van Dijk, where Højlund can make these channel runs and look for the ball. Mixed bag. There was a lot of endeavour with his performance, Højlund. He showed a lot for the ball, just sometimes the quality wasn't there, and he let himself down in that aspect a little bit. But it still feels like there's a player waiting to burst out in Højlund. But it feels like I've been saying that for a long while now. The two goals that came from this area of the pitch when Dalot was one-on-one with Alexander-Arnold was thanks to two things. The first goal, we'll talk about Martinez moving forward, which has a lot more freedom to do in the back three, is because Salah did not track him well enough at all. Because of Salah being left up the pitch, he was tasked more with having to track Martinez's run. And again, as poor as Trent Alexander-Arnold is with his defensive work, having that amount of space between himself and Mo Salah isn't going to help, because Salah will just never get back. And so having Mo Salah as the deep player that's supposed to be looking after Martinez, when he won the ball back to ignite the attack for his goal, he could move forward without the threat of Salah after he won the ball back, ghost into the box, and it left one of the Liverpool players having to make a decision of who picks him up. None of them made that decision, and he was able to find the ball on the inside and smash the ball into the roof of the net. Another one is Dalot getting into crossing opportunities, or Garnacho later in the game, and Diallo's far post movement to get on the end of crosses is top draw. It has to be said. He's fantastic. Just using those little sudden bits of movement to get away from a marker. Should have got one in the first half, to be honest with you. He just got a little bit ahead of the ball, but just so energetic and just so intelligent for such a young player, just to find space at the back post, whether that's pulled back to the edge of the box or at the back post to push it in, is top drawer. And again, United showed good value for the point. Fantastic performance to top it off, and on another day could have had three if it wasn't for silly mistakes at the back from Dalot, a bit more clinical finishing in the first half from Diallo and Højlund, and on another day we're speaking about an even more spectacular result. But full credit to him. Again, Liverpool, it's all about how you bounce back. This is a poor result. Don't go and lose to Forest. Keep the momentum going. Forest are on red-hot form as well, so that's a tough game to play off the back of this. And Forest won't make it easy because they defend so well. And when you're low on confidence and you've got some of the issues with certain players, that's a tough one for Liverpool. But that's the mark of a champion. You've got to overcome and get results in those situations. So we'll see. It's a game I'm looking forward to personally. But I'd love to know what you guys think. Like the video if you like it, dislike it if you disliked it, comment down below and tell me why either way, and subscribe if you want to see more. In a bit, lads.